Good evening, church family. It's so good to come into your home for a few minutes this evening and share a little truth with you. We certainly do miss seeing you fine people, and maybe it won't be too long till we'll be able to get back together and worship together again. I hope this truth this evening will be good for you and encouraging to you. And I know that we're reading here where Paul is in a terrible storm, and I know that we go through storms at times in our lives, and we want to look at this lesson tonight, and we trust this will be an encouragement to you, that you and I too can have the same anchors that Paul had, and we too can make it through the storm. So our scripture this evening is found in the book of Acts chapter 27, begin reading with verse 15 and reading down to about 29. And when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. And running under a certain island, which is called Claudia, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirded the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksand, strake sail, and so were driven. And we being exceedingly tossed with a tempest, the next day they lied the ship. And the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. And when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. And after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar. And lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God that it shall be, even as it was told me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. When the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country, and sounded and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. Then they feared lest we should have fallen upon rocks. They cast forth anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. I want to talk to us a few minutes this evening about 4 strong anchors for life's stormy seas. And certainly there will be storms along the way, but I'm glad there's some anchors that we can use that will hold us steady. We know that we see these brave sailors were in a storm, and that seemed to be very overwhelming. But on that ship was a man named Paul, and we know that he was a special child of God. He was a special man for several reasons. He was a child of God, and any child of God is special. He was a man on a mission. He was a man of faith, and he was in fellowship with God. Because of who he was, Paul anchored in the midst of this storm, even though the ship wasn't anchored. Those sailors threw 4 anchors into the sea in an attempt to steady the ship. Those anchors failed. Paul had 4 anchors as well. These anchors steadied him during the time of the storm. Even though that ship was shaken and battered, Paul was able to stand steady and strong. Let's look at those 4 strong anchors that kept Paul steady during the time of the storm. Those same anchors are available to you and me today. And I trust that we will use these anchors during the time of the storm that will keep us steady. First of all, the strong anchor of the presence of God. Isn't it awesome that we can have God's presence during this journey of life? We know that Moses, when God called him to go deliver the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, and Moses said, Who will go with me? And the Lord said, My presence shall go with thee. So if we have God's presence with us, we know that we can anchor the storm. And Paul had the strong anchor of the presence of God. Even in the midst of that raging storm, Paul found that he was not alone. And during our times of storm, we will see that we are not alone. The Lord came to him to minister to him and to his heart. Regardless of the storm that tosses your life and mine, if we have the same confidence that Paul had in his relationship to the Lord, then we can find faith in his promise to be with us always. We notice we look at Matthew 28:20, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. So God has promised his presence to be with us. And if his presence is with us, we can weather the storm. We need to be sure that God's presence is with us. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5, he says, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. So here's another promise that God will be with us and he'll never forsake us. And if we have his presence, we can weather the storm. We know that Psalms 23:4, David said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So here we see that this was a strong anchor of the presence of God. And we notice that if his presence is with us, we can go through the storms. What an encouragement it is to know that we will never face an instant of life on our own. We'll never face the storms alone. God's presence will be with us. Every step, every valley, every mountain will be graced by his presence. Psalms 23:6 says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So here we see this blessed footman of God. Goodness and mercy will follow us everywhere we go. Isn't it wonderful to know that God's presence will be with us and help us in the time of the storm? And we will face storms in this life. You may be going through one right now, but God's presence will be with you, and he'll never leave you during a time of storm. He'll be with you, and he'll help you. And I trust this will encourage you this evening to keep on keeping on, because God is with us. It would be a blessing if we enjoyed the manifest presence of the Lord as Paul did. But even when you cannot see him, he's still there. There are times that we cannot see him, but we know he's always there watching and leading and protecting and being God. The second anchor that Paul used was the strong anchor of the promises of God. Isn't it awesome that we can stand on the promises of God? Standing on the promises, I cannot fall. Standing on the promises. We need to stand on his promises. There are so many of his precious promises that we can stand on. We're so glad for that. Verses 24 and 25 says, fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar. And lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. And verse 25, wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God that it shall be even as it was told me. So Paul believed in the promise of God. He believed that everything would work out just as like the Lord said it would. As Paul weathered that long, terrible storm, the Lord came to him with a precious promise. He reminded Paul that he would stand before Caesar and that all those on the ship were to be spared as well. And here was a promise in this terrible storm that there was 276 souls on that ship. And that God had promised him to give him every one of them, that there wouldn't be a one of them lost. And Paul stood on that promise. For Paul, just having a word from God was enough to anchor him and to give him blessed assurance. Why? He knew that God was as good as his word. From Romans 4:21, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised, he was able to perform. So Paul realized that God was able to perform that any promise that he gave him, and he was able to stand on that. His promises are steadfast and true. What he has promised, we can count on. What he has promised, we can stand on. Notice some of these promises that will give us assurance. We know there are so many promises in the Word of God, but here's just a few that will help us in the time of a storm. There's a promise of brighter days. When you're going through the storm, we know it seems like the days are dark and long and lonely. It seems like we'll never get through. But we notice there is a promise of brighter days. Psalms chapter 30 and verse 5 says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. Thank the Lord. We know that it won't last always, because we know we have a promise of brighter days. Tomorrow will be a brighter day. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. And we have a promise of deliverance. Our Psalms 34:19, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them out of them all. How many? All. He delivers them out of them all. There are many afflictions for God's people. And with our times of afflictions and times of difficulty, but we have the promise that God will deliver us out of them all. Then everything is for our good. We know that Romans 8:28, we can stand on that promise, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and those that are called according to his purpose. And verse 32 of Romans chapter 8 says, he that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Then we have the promise of divine grace. We know that in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul had a thorn in the flesh, and it was bothering him. There's something in his body, something wasn't just right, and maybe some kind of a sickness or something, but there's something that, well, he called it a thorn in the flesh. And he said, I prayed 3 times, and he asked the Lord 3 times to deliver him from that thorn in the flesh. And in verse 9, the Lord said to him, and he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee. Sometimes the Lord doesn't seem to feel to take things from us, but his grace will be sufficient. There may be things that we have to go through at times, but his grace will be sufficient. Then there is the promise of ultimate glory in the end. Revelation 21:4, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. There shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. When it's all over, when the Lord has taken us through the last storm, there will be ultimate glory. We can go and be with him, and all tears will be wiped away from our eyes, and there will be no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, and no more sad goodbyes. Won't that be an awesome thing? But the Lord is able to take us through and to be with us during our journey through this world. His promises are based in and on his precious word. It is true, it is pure, inspired, and it will stand when the world is on fire. Aren't you glad we can stand on the promises? All those promises that we have, whatever the Lord has promised us, he will do. We have seen various figures quoted as to the number of promises in the Bible. We don't know just how many there are, but someone said there are 3,000 plus promises that you and I can stand on. And we know there is enough that we can stand on to get us through whatever we're going through. All the promises in his word we can stand on. So we need to be standing on his promises. You can claim the promises of God as an anchor for your soul as you sail the stormy seas of life. They will unlock the prisons of despair in which the devil seeks to chain us. Then we notice that there is a strong anchor of the providence of God. In verse 24, he said, fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar. So Paul was, it was God's will that he bring him before Caesar. And the Lord was going to take him through this storm to get him to Caesar. Paul is told by the Lord that this storm is a part of God working out his plan in Paul's life. And we know some of the storms that come our way are the plans of God working in our life. And some of them may be to help us to get stronger, help us to get closer to God, or whatever it may be. But the Lord will be with us through all the storms of life. At that moment in time, that storm was the safest place in the world that Paul could be. Why? Because he was in the will of the Lord, and God was working in a mighty way in the situation to bring about his plan for Paul's life. Did you know that God is doing the very same thing in your life as well? He's working out a plan. He's working out his plan in your life. And we need to remember, when we're going through the storms of life, God is with us, and he's working out a plan. He has a reason for everything that comes our way. And if we'll stay true and faithful, we'll be stronger when we get through. It may be simple faith, but I still believe that God is sovereign. That just means that he is in absolute control of everything that happens in our life. He is a sovereign Lord. Listen to the testimony of James concerning this sovereign Lord. In James chapter 1, verse 17, he said, every good and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. As long as I know that he orders a storm, then I can weather the storm. He knows what is best, and that is why he sends it into your life and mine. He knows what's best for us, and he is working it all out for you and me. So when we go through the storms, let's remember that the Lord is in the providence of God. The best thing we can do when the storms rage about us is run to him for refuge and cling to him until the storm passes by. And the song says, keep me safe till the storm passes by. In Psalm 57:1, in the shadow of thy wings, I will make my refuge until these calamities be overpassed. In Psalm 46:1, says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. That very present help, that means right now, for whatever it may be, he is present with us when we're going through the storms of life. Sometimes it seems that we can't see the face of God when we're going through the storms of life, and the enemy wants to make us feel that we're all alone. But God's presence will never leave us when we're going through the storms of life. He will always be there for us. So if you're going through a storm tonight, and you can't seem to feel his presence, you need to remember that he's always with us. He's there to help you. He's there to comfort you. He's there to take you through. Don't let the enemy discourage you and get you to throw in the towel. That's what he would like for us to do. He'd like for us to throw in the towel. He'd like for us to throw up our hands and quit. But let's keep on keeping on. God is with us, and God is going to see us through. I was reading about Robert Bruce of Scotland. He was a man of God. He was running for his life, fleeing from his persecutors. And he ducked into a small cave, and a spider immediately appeared and spun his web across the opening. Bruce's pursuers spanned across the landscape, knowing that he was nearby. Two of them approached the cave, and one of the men started to go in, and the other man stopped him. He said he could never have gotten into that without breaking that spider's web. And they went on. Bruce breathed this prayer: "Oh God, I thank thee that in the tiny bowels of a spider you can place for me a shelter." Thank the Lord. There's a shelter in the time of the storm. God uses many different things to protect his people. And here he used a spider's web that went across the cave to keep those men out and thought no one had gone in, and he was kept safe. So God has many ways of keeping us safe in the journeys of life, even in the storms of life. He can keep us safe. We noticed there was one guy on board who was enjoying the trip. Everyone else was scared to death. Everyone else was frightened. Everyone else had quit eating. They had quit doing anything. They had given. All hope was gone that any of them could be saved. But there was one guy on board that was enjoying the trip, and that was Paul. Why was he enjoying the trip? Because he believed in God. Because he believed in God. He knew God was working, and he used that truth as an anchor. We notice that down here we see that the storms of life attack them, and they run from the church, and they run they run out of the things. And we know that sometimes these storms attack us, and we want to run from them. But let's look to the Lord. Let's run to him instead of running away. Let's run to him, and let's stay in the boat. We notice that in the fourth thing we'd like to notice, a strong anchor of the performance of God. God can perform these miracles. Verse 43, the centurion commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. Verse 44, and the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship, and so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. So all of these people escaped to land. What the Lord told Paul and what Paul believed would happen came to pass. Everyone made it safely to the shore. All 276 souls made it safely to the shore. Why? Because God was with them. God kept them in the time of the storm. And here the ship was all broke to pieces, and all the people who could swim jumped in first, and the others, they went out, some on rest, some on boards, and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. Through God's performance, God helped every one of them to escape to land. Paul told them that there will not be a hair of anyone's head that will fall off. God kept his word. He spared every life and proved himself to be as good as his word. God is able to work it all out. If we'll run to him and leave it all to him, he will work it all out. He will help us. He will get you through your storm and land you safely beyond it. It may look like the boat is going to sink. It may look like the storms of life are going to prevail. It may look like that you're going under. But if we'll keep our trust, our faith, our hope in him, he will see us through. Thank the Lord. When the waves have all settled down, when the winds have ceased their blowing, and when the rain has stopped, when the storm clouds have moved off to the horizon, you will see that God was in control all along. So we need to remember that God is in control when we're in the time of the storm. I can promise you this, no storm in this life will be able to blow you off the course that God has determined for your life. Because if God has determined for you a course in your life, the storms of life will not blow you off course if you will keep your anchors in him. He will secure you during the storm, and he will successfully deliver you to the safe harbor of his glory. He will keep you through the storm. He will keep us throughout this lifetime, and he will deliver us in the end safely to his harbor. Thank God. One day we'll be safely home, but there'll be storms that we have to travel through on the way there. But God will take us through all of them. Corrie ten Boom said it this way: when Jesus takes your hand, he keeps you tight. When Jesus keeps you tight, he leads you through your whole life. When Jesus leads you through your life, he brings you safely home. So the Lord will lead us safely home. So during these terrible storms that we have to endure at times, let's just run to him and put our anchor in him and stand on the promises of God, and he will see us through. We know the enemy would have us to throw in the towel and throw up our hands and quit, but there's no place to quit. We've gone too far now to go back. Let's keep on keeping on. God has got victory in store for us, and one day we will be safely home on the other side. Won't that be awesome? Then throughout the end age of eternity, we can rejoice and be thrilled and be happy and enjoy the presence of God. I would just remind you that our God is as strong and powerful, that God is a strong and powerful God. We notice in Luke 1:37 says, for with God nothing shall be impossible. So the Lord is able to take us through. He's able to help us to overcome any obstacle that we may face. He can do anything that needs to be done. Look at Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 20. Now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh within us. God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think. So God is able to see us through. Someone said he'll pull you through if you can stand the pull. So let's just hang on tight and look to him, trust him, put our anchor in him, and he will see us through. Don't throw in the towel. Don't quit along the way. Just keep on keeping on, and God has got victory in store for all of us. He didn't save you to lose his grip on you in the storm. No, he saved you to take you home to glory, and that's just what he'll do if we'll just keep on keeping on. Have you set your anchors deep in the Lord? If you have, then you can weather the storms of life. If you haven't, be prepared. Be prepared to be blown about by the winds of adversity. If we have set our anchors in him, he will keep us steady. But if we haven't, we can be prepared to be blown about by the winds of adversity. But let's put our anchor, let's put our trust, Let's put our hope in Him. And there's not anything that comes our way that He won't help us with. He'll be there for us. He'll be there for you. We know that the enemy sometimes don't want us to hold on. He don't want us to put our trust in God. He wants us to throw in the towel. He wants us to quit. But let's keep on keeping on. And God will see you through. Blessings on you tonight. We trust that God will bless you. Those of you that are going through the storms of life, just keep your faith and your hope and your trust in Him, and He will see you through. Bless His name. We trust that God will bless you and keep you, and one day take you home safely. Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we come to you tonight with grateful hearts. We thank you for your love and for your mercy and for your goodness. We know that you want what is best for every one of your children. There may be some out there tonight that's going through difficulty, going through the storms of life, and it seems like the waves are just about to come in and overtake them. But oh God, help them to look to you, the author and finisher of our faith, and help them to stand on your promises and put their trust in you and run to you as a refuge. And you're able to keep us all safely. And Lord, tonight we ask you to be with us in a special way. And help us to keep our eyes on you and our hand in yours. We know, Lord, that you will take us through. We ask you to encourage and strengthen everyone tonight that's out there in the radio land and that's listening to us tonight. We trust you'll help us all to put our faith and our trust in you. And one day, we'll all be safely home. And help us to keep the faith. For all you do, we'll give you the praise. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.